Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus with a dual part video. This is both the B&R announcement as well as the wrap-up video for the Urza Oko list we've been working on for the past week as we get ready to transition into Pioneer and doing some chunky red, mono red aggro, whatever you wish to call the deck list. But as a friendly reminder, we're doing the 50 weeks, 50 decks and 50 week program, so if you want to check that out, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. But anyways, back to the B&R announcement. So everybody's been kind of expecting Oko to get banned in the modern format. It's been banned in standard. It's been basically banned in historic. It's been banned in Pioneer, and it's been showing up in about 40% of decks in modern. As I've been discussing on our Discord here and there, and in the Burn Discord to a lesser degree, my thought process wasn't necessarily that Oko needed banned. My thought process was the problem with Oko was the fast mana needed banned, particularly Mox Opal. Much to my surprise and delight, Mox Opal is banned in Modern. Oko FIFA Crowns, obviously public enemy number one, was banned. Basically, they break it down that basically the Urza Oko decks have been winning about 50%, 55% of their game matches in the non-mirror match things, and that Mox Opal has contributed to this a lot. Also contributes to the various prison decks. It was part of KCI. So definitely a card that felt like it needed to go. The Urza decks need to knock down a peg. The artifact-based decks with that card in particular have been nuts since the beginning. Affinity's always had some very good draws based around that card. Affinity kind of takes the bullet for Urza Oko, but at the same time, a lot of the format's been forced to slow down with the unbanning of Stoneforge Mystic. Oko had kind of accelerated that slowdown of the format, and now they're getting rid of another busted enabler, basically leaving only Ancient Stirrings as kind of the only busted of the big three they identified at some point last year, which was Faithless Looting, Mox Opal, Ancient Stirrings. But I think Stirrings is a little bit different in what it enables, and I think the format is much easier able to combat something like Tron than it is something like Urza Oko. The final card they banned was Mycosynth the Lattice. This is kind of I think this was kind of a nod towards the second place deck in a lot of these situations has been Eldrazi Tron, and just kind of having a one card combo that can end the game is kind of insane. Because basically it requires you to just have 4 copies of Card in the Great Creator in your main deck, no other card, and then 1 card in your sideboard, and you can effectively end the game if that pair of cards is landed. So I think this is a creative way to kind of take down the great creator decks while not completely neutering them. There's still a lot of great bullets that they can find. Things like Witchbane Orb against Burn, or Mystic Forge against the Grindier decks, or many other various silver bullets. Sorcerer Spyglass, Pithing Needle, any type of Worm Coil Engine, Walking Ballista. So I think this card still has a huge amount of utility and helps to shut down the artifact decks, but artifact decks are already taking a huge blow right now anyway, so I don't know how relevant that will be moving forward. But Karn, I don't think, is taking too huge of a hit by losing Lattice, although it is the instant KO win is now gone from the format as well. That pretty much wraps up the ban portion of the announcement. They gave their reasoning. I think I'm going to expand on that reasoning a little bit further when we discuss kind of the wrap up of the Urza Oko decks as we take a look at some of the lists, playing, etc. But that is going to be the wrap up for the actual ban announcement. My thoughts on the bannings. I figured Oko was going to go. I really thought it was Mox Opal that needed to go. And then Mycosynth the Lattice is just kind of a bonus, especially as I've primarily been a burn player. And, having that leave the format feels nice that Etron doesn't have an automatic lockout in addition to their Chalice of the Void locks. As far as the bans, a lot of people complain about bannings in formats. If you're playing a deck that is toward the top of the format and it's not considered a fair deck, or cards are really getting heat, you should kind of expect your cards to get banned at some point and be looking for some way to sidestep that or maybe transition. And I can speak that from experience. There was a while there that I was like always playing burn, so I was safe. But I bought into Is It Phoenix, lost Faithless Looting. That deck pretty much failed to exist after that in the Pioneer or in the modern format. It is decent in Pioneer, but that's a whole other ball game. And now I do own Green Tron with Karn Lattice Lock on the sideboards. That is another card that I will be losing. So I have been hit by these bans myself. It sucks, but as Magic players, we should kind of expect that if things are getting obnoxious in formats, that Wizards is eventually going to take notice and knock them down a peg. So that's it. Let's jump into the actual wrap up of in-depth discussion of the Simic Oko decks as to why they were banned and maybe why they were a problem in the format. So the first list up is the blue-green or Simic-based Urza decks that we've been playing, largely based off of Canister's list. I think this is the deck we had the most success with in the decks we've run this week. Didn't get an opportunity to play as many leagues as I would have liked, especially the Urza Prism deck I would have liked to take a shot at, but the problem with when you're on a limited content creation schedule, when you're playing a deck that's more of a grindier mid-range deck, the leagues tend to take longer, and you have less time to obviously play more leagues. So, the two leagues that we played with this variant were both over 2 hours, whereas, a Burn League or probably the Chunky Red League, those leagues probably going to take between an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. Really can add up if you're trying to get an extra league in here and there. So, but the deck was very powerful. It was very good. There were a lot of decisions to be had. I think there was a lot of complicated sequencing with Mox Opal turns and with Gilded Goose, as well as fetching lands to turn on your Arkham's Astrolabe. I think this deck was extremely well built. Had explosive draws where you could potentially Urza on turn 2. You could Oko even on turn 1, some draws. Combine that with the beautiful Cryptic Command Mystic Sanctuary locks, especially if you get like an Emery and some cantrips going, you can just basically lock your opponent out of the game. So this deck was very beautiful, but I think it suffered from a problem very similar to what those of you that have been playing Modern for a really long time might remember the Jund lists with Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman was a problem. It was basically Birds of Paradise that a black deck could play. So they initially tried banning Bloodbraid Elf out of the list, and the deck still just adapted and started playing like 4-mana planeswalkers like Ajani, the red-white Ajani. It was playing the lockdown lands and kind of win the game that way. I believe it was called Ajundi. It was 4-color Jund, basically. So basically the problem ended up being Deathrite Shaman, and acceleration is always a problem in these formats. And acceleration that serves other purposes is kind of problematic. And I think that's where Mox Opal really runs into problems, is Mox Opal serves many different purposes. This serves as obviously very quick, very cheap or accelerant that doesn't have any restrictions of summoning sickness or anything. The deck building cost is low when you're already wanting to leverage artifacts with things like Emery, Urza, and such. Oko can turn one into a 3/3 later in the game, and you're getting other artifact synergies with things like Gilded Goose. I think Mox Opal was just kind of the problem child of this deck. That said, I understand why they banned Oko. This card could pop up in literally any deck and potentially make that deck better. I played the meme Teamer Burn with Oko in the list, and it made the deck better. It gave Burn a grind plan in some mid games. Obviously, that's not what Burn should be capable of doing, at least according to what a lot of people think. So I understand why Oko got the axe, even though I do think Opal was the problem, specifically in the Urza Oko shells. I think Oko was a problem with the format overall, not necessarily in this shell. I think this shell could have benefited from just Opal being banned if they wanted to keep this shell intact and not cause too many problems. But Oko got banned for other reasons, mainly because it was showing up in 35-40% of decks. Tend to me a very powerful card. But beyond that, let's take a look at a couple of the other lists that have showed up in these last couple weeks, and finally the deck that unfortunately we really didn't get a chance to play. So the other thing that popped up the last couple weeks of the SCG tour specifically was this Experimental Frenzy version. It was kind of using this kind of a bit of a nombo with a bunch of counter spells in your deck. but it did allow you to, churn through your deck, get a little bit of card advantage, and Oko couldn't turn this into an elk. It was a source of card advantage that Oko couldn't really answer. Other adaptations of this list was Blood Moon in the sideboard, which was pretty good against some of the decks that were trying to attack it, like the Amulet Field decks and such, which that deck did take a hit by losing Oko, but I think it may still be a thing. But yeah, just the pure power of being able to play a turn 2 Oko and then start backing up with counter spells, or even potentially being able to counterspell with that. If you have like a particularly busted draw, being able to hold up a Metallic Rebuke on turn 1 after playing a Gilded Goose is just kind of insane. So, Gallop Blast was another adaptation, allowed them to kind of slow down the stem the bleeding of some of the more aggressive decks in the format that maybe could get under Oko. So things like, random things like 8 Whack or Elves or some of the other decks that potentially get under like a turn 2, turn 3 Oko. Gallop Blast could certainly help stem the tide in those matchups. And then Ether Spellbomb also paired with Gallop Blast to kind of slow down the creature decks. Then Experimental Frenzy kind of gave way to the next build that we'll be taking a look at, which is basically the build we were playing, only they moved Fatal Push and Replicate in the main deck, as opposed to the copies of Icefang Coatl. Icefang Coatl is a very good churn through your deck kind of thing, while also being a pseudo removal spell in certain matchups, like Burn, Jund, Death Shadow. The decks that can potentially pressure you before you can get your engine set up if you have a slower draw, before you can start getting your Cryptic Lock started and such. But the one huge adaptation to this list, as opposed to, it was kind of a amalgamation of the two lists we just looked at, was the addition of Future Sight. It's basically a slightly more expensive future or experimental frenzy, but without the drawback of frenzy itself. It is a little bit more expensive on the casting side here, but I think this was a very nice addition at the tail end of this deck archetype, just as a way to kind of gain card advantage in these kind of pseudo mirrors. And it was an adaptation that just recently popped up this weekend. Obviously was huge, but kind of unfortunate that this popped up at the very, very end of the archetype and didn't really have a chance to be truly explored and become part of the main part of the format. We have a couple more versions to look at, the Urza Prison and the Urza Thopter Sword combo, and then the Urza Prison decks, and then we'll pretty much be wrapping up the video, since unfortunately we can't revisit this deck since, it no longer exists. So here we are, taking a look at the Thopter Sword combo version of the deck. This version was a little bit different than the one we played. They have Worm Invention, Cryptic Command Lock still, but they only have one copy of Thopter Sword. I think this is a good approach. It gives you another way to close out the game without watering down your deck with a combo that isn't always good in a lot of matchups. If you take a look at the Modern Challenge we played this past weekend, there was a lot of spots where assembling the Thopter Sword combo just wasn't relevant or good in some spots. Would have been good in a lot of the matchups, but sometimes it's just those are just kind of dead cards in a lot of spots. So only having one of each copy and then a small Whir package. The difference was the version we played had, may as well search it up, right? Dr. Foundry. The version we were playing, as opposed to the Whir version, was a more combo-focused build, similar. Oh, that's a legacy deck. Wow. Urza. So this was the version we were playing, or similar to it, with a Thopter Sword combo as the main centerpiece of the deck. 2 copies of Thoughtseize, 3 copies of Thoughtcast. This deck it definitely wasn't as good as the mid-range version. There's a lot of ways where obviously having more win cons helps. Playing, the Thopter Foundry, we did win 1 or 2 games where we just literally went Thopter Foundry, put sword into play, activate, pretty much game over. Opponent couldn't come back from that. They didn't have any disruption for it in the main deck. But this version, I think, felt weaker in certain matchups, like against Control. When we played against Bant Snow with Nick Winsauce, it felt a little bit weaker. I think we still had a chance to win that matchup, but it was a fun on my part. But basically, this version felt like a little bit weaker version, and I think it was Zan Syed all the way back in October of 2019 was talking about how the mid-range version just felt better than the combo version. And from what little I played of the combo-ish version, I think I tend to agree with him that the mid-range version with the cryptic commands and the mystic sanctuaries was just more powerful. There's one final version, unfortunately we didn't get to play, but I'll go over for the lulz. It was kind of the ultimate meme of Oko and company, but obviously had some amount of success. So take a look at Urza Prison Oko with Karn the Great Creator. So this deck is just stupid. So you're playing the Urza Oko shell, but no Thopter Founder combo, no, no counter spells. You're just playing every single busted 2019 card you can get a hold of. Karn the Great Creator, Oko Thief of Crowns, Emery, Urza. And beyond that, you're using Liquid Metal Coating, pairing it with Ancient Grudge to just boom, boom. There goes your permanent. There goes your permanent. Land destruction. Kill your planeswalker. Do this, do that. Meanwhile, Karn the Great Creator, pretty good in the Oko mirrors, especially the Urza mirrors. And then, so basically you're just trying to set up this various different things and playing some busted fatty or busted planeswalker on turn 2 or turn 3. Either trying to play Oko or Karn or Urza. You have the Lattice Lock, you have Ensnaring Bridge, you have Pithing Needle shut down, Problematic Planeswalkers, another copy of Engineered Explosives in your sideboard, Tormod's Crypt for Graveyard decks. Basically, you've got all the good hits from Karn, you've got this Ancient Grudge Liquid Metal Coating machine gun combo. Just the deck is so silly, but yet so elegant in what it's trying to do. And then just obviously playing the 3 colors and then having some Blood Moons in the sideboard. So I'm not sure Megas is the correct call. You could just easily play regular Blood Moon. I think that would have been better than Megas in this particular build. But very powerful set of cards. Doesn't really matter what you put in around it, but Karn just adds another layer to the locks. Kind of allows you to play the Urza package without playing Ur in your deck. It allows you to put like all the greatest hits in your sideboard. So, very powerful deck. I wish we would have gotten a chance to play it, but that's one of the things when you're doing like a deck a week is sometimes you don't get to all the offshoot variants. But I did want to give this deck a mention. That way, there's some recording of it on the internets on my YouTube channel as to the variants of these decks as we're going through them. This week, largely kind of irrelevant now, but I did want to get a chance to play this deck while it was still legal. And I did have a strong feeling that today was going to be a ban day for Oko. But anyways, if you like these type of videos, I will be doing these kind of wrap-ups for each deck style we play. Starting today, probably later today actually, I'll be working on mono red aggro, mono red mid-range, chunky red, whatever you want to call it in Pioneer. And then the following week, I have a feeling we'll be working on Eldrazi Tron and we'll see how that deck develops in the light of Microsynth the Last being born, if they continue to play the Karn package or if they do something else. Anyways, this has been John for MTG Nexus. I hope y'all got a little bit of information out of this long form video.